October 14, 1943, 20,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. The sky is already crowded with contrails when the first bursts of flak appear. Black, sudden, perfectly timed. They blossom around the bomber stream like iron flowers, each one a calculated guess of where the B-17s will be in the next second. Inside the aluminum skin of the bombers, crews brace as the aircraft shudders.
Oxygen masks.
Intercoms crackle. Somewhere behind them, an engine coughs and then goes silent. Then the fighters arrive. They come head-on, silver specks growing fast, cannons flashing. German pilots have waited for this moment. They always do. The American escorts, short-legged fighters, have already turned back toward England. From here to the target and all the way home, the bombers are alone. This is Black Thursday. By the time the surviving B-17 stagger back across the North Sea, 60 bombers are gone. 600 men, killed, wounded, or captured, in a single day. The daylight bombing campaign, the cornerstone of Allied air strategy, is on the brink of collapse. For the United States Army Air Forces, 1943 has been a year of brutal arithmetic. Bombers can reach Germany. They can hit targets with growing accuracy. But without long-range fighter escort, they are being destroyed faster than they can be replaced. The theory behind daylight bombing is elegant. Tight formations of heavily armed bombers will defend themselves. In practice, it is a fantasy. German fighters attack in waves, frontal passes, rockets, heavy cannon, then peel away before defensive guns can track them. Losses are not occasional. They are systemic. Schweinfurt proves it. In the aftermath of Black Thursday, the mood inside Allied headquarters darkens. Commanders begin to question the entire premise of the campaign. Some argue for a shift to night bombing only, leaving precision attacks to the British model. Others argue for pausing deep raids entirely until a solution can be found. But there is no time. Every month the war drags on. Germany produces more tanks, more guns, more aircraft. The invasion of Europe, still only a plan, depends on air superiority that does not yet exist. What the Allies need is simple to describe and painfully hard to build. A fighter that can go all the way to Germany, fight there, and come back. The problem is range. Existing Allied fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolt and the Spitfire, are excellent machines, but they are tethered by fuel. Drop tanks help, but not enough. Over central Germany, bomber crews watch their escorts peel away, knowing what comes next. German pilots know it too. They call the space beyond escort range the free hunt zone. And then, quietly at first, something changes. In test flights and limited deployments, a new aircraft begins to show numbers that don't quite make sense. Long range, high altitude, fuel efficiency that borders on the improbable. When fitted with external tanks, it doesn't turn back. Keeps going. The aircraft is the P-51 Mustang, but not the early versions dismissed months earlier. This one is different. Under its sleek cowling sits a British engine, the Rolls-Royce Merlin, license-built in America. At altitude, it breathes better than anything the Germans can throw at it. It doesn't lose power where other fighters choke. More importantly, it doesn't run out of fuel. To bomber crews who have watched friends die over the heart of Germany, the first sightings of Mustangs feel unreal. Slim silhouettes with distinctive wings slide into formation and stay there, mile after mile, past the old turning points, past the familiar landmarks of danger, toward Berlin. German pilots encounter them next and are just as stunned. Where they once expected defenseless bombers, they now find fast, aggressive fighters waiting. Fighters that don't break off after a few minutes. Fighters that follow them down, chase them home, and wait near their own airfields. The rules have changed, but in late 1943, none of this is yet decisive. The Mustang exists in limited numbers. The Luftwaffe still has depth. Veteran German pilots still dominate much of the airspace. And the bombing campaign is still bleeding. The crisis is not over. It is merely approaching its turning point. Black Thursday forces a reckoning. Either the Allies solve the escort problem or daylight bombing dies. Everything that follows, the destruction of the Luftwaffe, the opening of the skies over Normandy, the collapse of German air power, depends on what happens next. And it will hinge on a single idea, embraced fully for the first time, that fighters are not there just to protect bombers. They are there to destroy the enemy's ability to fight at all. The aircraft that will make that possible is already in the air. Early 1944, Southern England, 8th Air Force fighter bases. On the flight line, the P-51s look almost fragile compared to the bulky P-47s parked nearby. Long noses, thin wings, clean lines. To some pilots, they still look like a gamble, too light, too different, too untested at scale. But the briefings tell a different story. This time, the escort route goes farther, much farther. When the bombers lift off, the Mustangs form up and stay with them past every familiar marker. Past the Channel coast, past the old turning points where escorts used to peel away. The radio chatter shifts. Bomber crews notice it first. The fighters are still there. Hours into the mission, they're still there. For the first time, American fighters are entering airspace that had been a Luftwaffe sanctuary. German pilots are the next to realize something is wrong. They scramble as usual, confident in a system that has worked for years. Intercept the bombers. Hit them hard. Disengage before escorts become a factor. But as they climb to altitude and close in, they see them, sleek, long-winged fighters pacing the bombers effortlessly. They don't turn back. They wait. Combat reports from German units begin to reflect confusion. Escorts are encountered deep over the Reich. They remain at altitude. They fight aggressively. And when German fighters try to disengage, the Mustangs follow. Down through clouds, across fronts, toward home bases. This is new. The Merlin-powered P-51 changes the geometry of air combat. At high altitude, it has the speed to engage and the range to linger. It doesn't have to choose between escorting bombers and surviving the trip home. With drop tanks, it can do both and still have fuel to fight. German pilots begin to notice another problem. The Mustangs don't just protect, they hunt. This shift becomes explicit when General James Doolittle takes command of the 8th Air Force. His order is simple and radical. Fighters are no longer tethered tightly to bomber formations. Their primary mission is no longer defense. It is offense. Seek out German fighters. Destroy them wherever they appear, over the bombers, en route, and even near their own airfields. For the Luftwaffe, this is catastrophic. Previously, German pilots could choose when to engage. Now they are being intercepted on the way in, forced into combat at altitude, and pursued on the way out. Losses increase not just over targets, but during every phase of the mission. Airfields that once felt safe become killing zones. The Mustangs impact compounds quickly. German fighter units lose experienced pilots at a rate they cannot replace. Training pipelines are already strained. Fuel shortages limit flight hours. New pilots arrive with fewer skills and less confidence, and are immediately thrown against veteran American escorts flying superior machines. The imbalance grows with every week. Operations like Big Week in February 1944 make the shift unmistakable. American bombers strike aircraft factories, while Mustangs and other escorts tear into German interceptors. The Luftwaffe is forced to defend its own production centers, and pays dearly for it. By March, the pattern is clear. When American bombers appear, Mustangs appear with them. When German fighters rise, Mustangs rise to meet them. When German pilots try to disengage, Mustangs stay. The psychological effect is profound. German pilots begin missions already expecting heavy opposition. Veteran leaders fall. Unit cohesion suffers. The Luftwaffe is still fighting, but it is bleeding expertise faster than it can recover. And then, on March 4, 1944, something happens that many German commanders will later describe as the moment they knew the war in the air was lost. American fighters escort bombers all the way to Berlin. Seeing Mustangs over the capital shatters any remaining illusion of control. The Reich's heart is no longer protected by distance. The last barrier has fallen. From this point forward, the Luftwaffe is no longer defending German airspace. It is struggling to survive within it. What began as a solution to the escort problem is becoming something far larger, a systematic destruction of Germany's defensive air system, pilot by pilot, base by base. The Mustang is not just saving bombers anymore. It is dismantling the Luftwaffe itself. February, March 1944. The skies over Germany. Operation Big Week. The American plan is ruthless in its simplicity. Bomb the factories that build German aircraft and force the Luftwaffe to rise and defend them. Every German fighter that takes off becomes a target. Every engagement becomes an opportunity to bleed the enemy of something far more precious than metal. Experienced pilots. As the bomber streams cross into Germany, the pattern repeats day after day. German fighters scramble in strength, climbing hard to altitude. They expect the usual engagement. Brief clashes near the bombers, then disengagement before fuel runs low. Instead, they find Mustangs waiting. The P-51s do not stay tight to the bombers anymore. They range outward in wide arcs, hunting. They attack interceptors before they can form up. They break German formations as they climb. And when German pilots try to escape, they discover the most terrifying truth of all. The Mustangs can follow them home. German after-action reports begin to describe something unprecedented. American fighters circling near Luftwaffe airfields, catching aircraft as they land, attacking pilots at their most vulnerable moment, low, slow, and fuel-starved. These are not accidents. They are deliberate tactics enabled by range. The Luftwaffe's defensive depth collapses. Losses accelerate. Not just aircraft, but leadership. Staffelkapitän, flight leaders with years of combat experience, are killed in growing numbers. Gruppenkommander vanish from rosters. Units are rebuilt with green pilots who lack the instincts to survive this new kind of air war. Training cannot keep up. Fuel shortages make everything worse. German pilots are flying fewer hours before being thrown into combat. They face American opponents who have trained extensively, who rotate through combat tours, who fly aircraft that give them speed, altitude performance, and endurance. It is no longer an even contest. During Big Week, the Luftwaffe is forced into exactly the fight it cannot win. Defend factories and lose pilots, or preserve pilots and lose industry. Either choice leads to collapse. The Mustangs ensure there is no safe option. By the end of February 1944, German aircraft production is damaged but not destroyed. The Luftwaffe is. This distinction matters. Factories can be rebuilt. Pilots cannot. As March begins, American escorts push even deeper. Missions to Berlin become routine. The bombers still take losses, but nothing like 1943. The ratio has flipped. German fighter losses now exceed American losses by margins that grow every week. Veteran German pilots begin to disappear entirely. Later, Hermann Göring will admit it bluntly. When he saw American fighters over Berlin, he knew the war was lost. Not because of the bombs, but because the Luftwaffe no longer controlled its own airspace. The Mustang had taken that away. The consequences ripple outward. Without air superiority, Germany cannot protect its cities, its factories, or its armies in the field. Troop movements become visible. Rail lines are exposed. The coming invasion of Western Europe is no longer a question of if, only when. The path to D-Day is being cleared in the air. The P-51 Mustang does not win the war in a single battle. It wins it by making German resistance unsustainable, by forcing combat every day, by turning Germany's greatest asset, its veteran pilots, into an irreplaceable loss. By the spring of 1944, the Luftwaffe is still flying. But it is no longer a force capable of stopping anything. The bomber streams keep coming. The Mustangs keep hunting. And the sky over Germany, once lethal to the Allies, becomes a graveyard for the defenders of the Reich. Spring 1944. Over Germany and occupied Europe. The new phase of the air war. By April 1944, the air war has fundamentally changed character. The Luftwaffe is no longer fighting to defeat the Allied bombing campaign. It is fighting to avoid annihilation. Every sortie risks the loss of pilots Germany cannot replace. Every interception invites pursuit by fighters that seem to have endless fuel and relentless intent. The P-51 Mustang has turned the sky into hostile territory for the defenders. American fighter groups now operate with a freedom that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Mustangs roam far from the bomber streams, sweeping ahead of them, clearing the airspace before the bombers even arrive. Others linger behind, catching damaged or retreating German aircraft. Some circle near known airfields, waiting patiently. German pilots begin to describe the experience as being hunted. This constant pressure destroys what remains of Luftwaffe cohesion. Units that once operated with confidence now scramble piecemeal. Communications falter. Radar warnings come too late. The Luftwaffe's defensive system, once layered and methodical, unravels under continuous attack. And the Mustangs are always there. The effect on pilot survival rates is devastating. In 1941 and 1942, a skilled German pilot could expect to fly dozens of missions and survive. By mid-1944, life expectancy for a new fighter pilot drops precipitously. Many are shot down on their first or second combat sortie. They are facing enemies who have seen it all before. American pilots, by contrast, benefit from rotation, training depth, and aircraft reliability. They fly missions, gain experience, and, if they survive their tour, return home to train others. Knowledge accumulates on the Allied side and evaporates on the German side. The imbalance compounds daily. German commanders attempt to conserve strength, ordering limited engagements or restricting operations to favorable conditions. It makes little difference. The bombing continues regardless. Factories burn. Rail yards are smashed. Fuel shortages worsen. Even when German fighters stay grounded, the Mustangs dominate uncontested skies. Air superiority is no longer contested. It is absolute. By May 1944, Allied planners reach a critical conclusion. The Luftwaffe can no longer meaningfully interfere with an invasion of Western Europe. German fighters may appear sporadically, but they cannot cannot sustain losses, and cannot stop the bombers or the fighters that guard them. The road to Normandy is open from the air. The Mustang's role in this outcome cannot be overstated. It is not merely the aircraft's performance, though its speed, range, and altitude capability are decisive. It is the doctrine it enables. For the first time, American fighters are not reacting to German moves. They are imposing their own. German pilots sense this loss of initiative acutely. Memoirs written after the war describe a creeping realization that skill and courage are no longer enough. The enemy appears everywhere, controls the engagement, and chooses when the fight ends. The sky no longer belongs to Germany. As June approaches, the Luftwaffe is a shadow of its former self. Aircraft remain on paper. Bases still exist. But the experienced men who once gave those machines meaning are gone. Shot down, captured, or killed. What remains cannot stop what is coming. The P-51 Mustang has done more than escort bombers. It has systematically dismantled the Luftwaffe's ability to resist. And with that resistance broken, the final phase of the war in Europe becomes possible. The invasion is no longer a gamble. It is an inevitability. June 1944 onward. Western Europe. After the air war is decided. When Allied troops land in Normandy, they do so under a sky that no longer belongs to Germany. The Luftwaffe still exists on paper, but it is absent where it matters. German ground units look up and see Allied aircraft almost continuously. Fighters, fighter bombers, reconnaissance planes, moving with confidence, precision, and impunity. This is not an accident of timing. It is the result of a campaign already won. The P-51 Mustang does not appear over the beaches in overwhelming numbers on D-Day itself. It doesn't need to. Its work has already been done. The German Air Force that might have contested the landings has been dismantled months earlier. Shot down not in one climactic battle, but through relentless attrition. Pilot by pilot, squadron by squadron. Without air cover, German movements become visible and vulnerable. Columns are attacked on roads. Trains are destroyed. Fuel shortages worsen. Command and control collapses. The Wehrmacht fights bravely on the ground, but it fights blind. The loss of the sky becomes the loss of maneuver. In the months that follow, the pattern repeats across Western Europe. Allied armies advance behind a curtain of air power that Germany can. Oil production collapses. Even desperate measures, jet fighters, new interceptors, arrive too late and in too few numbers to matter. They face Mustangs the moment they take off. After the war, German leaders speak with striking clarity about what defeated them. Hermann Göring's admission stands out. Seeing American fighters over Berlin meant the war was lost. Not because of the damage they caused that day, but because of what their presence represented. The end of sanctuary, the end of depth, the end of time. The P-51 Mustang crushed the Luftwaffe not simply by destroying aircraft, but by destroying experience. Germany could build new planes. It could not rebuild the veteran pilot corps that had taken years to develop. Once that reservoir was gone, every new engagement accelerated the collapse. Air power became a one-way equation. In retrospect, Black Thursday marks the crisis, but the Mustang marks the solution. It restores the viability of daylight bombing, yes, but more importantly, it enables a shift from defense to dominance, from escort to pursuit, from survival to control. The Luftwaffe is not pushed back. It is hunted to extinction. By 1945, Allied bombers fly almost unopposed over the ruins of the Reich. The once feared German fighter force is reduced to scattered sorties and symbolic resistance. The outcome of the war is no longer in doubt. When the sky is lost, everything beneath it follows. The P-51 Mustang did not win the war alone, but it made victory possible by breaking the Luftwaffe where it mattered most. Over Germany, at altitude, day after day until nothing remained. It escorted the bombers to Berlin, and in doing so, it escorted Nazi Germany to defeat.